Hello everybody, I hope you all are doing well again. Today I am up with the second chapter of Indian Polity, that is making of the constitution. See, in our last video we've seen the preamble, that is chapter 4 of our Indian Polity Laxmikant. Let's see, after seeing that the preamble was the conclusion to the constitution which was actually kept on the introduction, let's see how is our constitution made. See, it was in 1934. The idea came up. Who gave this idea? M.N. Roy. Who is he? He was a pioneer of communist movement in India. And in 1935, after 1934, there was an officially demanded Constituent Assembly. What was there? Indian National Congress actually first time officially demanded the Constituent Assembly. And after this 1935, it was in 1938 where Jawaharlal Nehru declared that the Constitution of Free India must be framed and there should be no outside interference by a Constituent Assembly elected on the basis of adult franchise that we still have today. So, in 1934 it was the idea, in 1935 it was officially demanded, and in 1938 it was declared. Jawaharlal Nehru declared that yes, we should have a free constitution. And then in 1940 we'll see it was finally accepted, which we actually call the August Offer. See, demand was finally accepted by the British government, which is known as August Offer of 1940. And then in 1942, Sir Stafford Cripps, which is whatever thing he gives it, which will be called Cripps Proposal. We'll see it here. And so Sir Stafford Cripps, a member of the cabinet, came to India with a draft proposal of the British government. And this draft proposal was actually called the Cripps Proposal. And then it was rejected by the Muslim League. Why? Because they wanted India to be divided into two autonomous states with two separate constituent assemblies. And so after this Cripps proposal was discarded, we see that the cabinet mission was sent to India and it rejected the idea of the two constituent assemblies, but it put forth a scheme for constituent assembly which more or less satisfied the Muslim League. So this was how the demand came in. Let's quickly go through them. 1934 we saw idea, 1935 it was officially demanded, 1938 it was declared, 1940 it was accepted, 1942 was the Cripps proposal, in 1946 we'll see later it was constituted, and then there were first meeting, and then there was objectives resolution also. So what is it? Let's look into the composition of the Constituent Assembly. See, Constituent Assembly constituted in November 1946 under the scheme formulated by the Cabinet Mission, as we see here. So what all did it say? It said that the total strength of the Constituent Assembly was to be 389. Of this, 296 seats were allotted to British India and 93 seats to the princely states. So what do we see? That out of these 389, 296 were to British India, to 93 to princely states, and then 292 members were actually drawn from the 11 governors provinces and 4 from the 4 chief commissioner provinces. So just like today we have states and our Lok Sabha seats are divided into different states, at that point of time there were provinces and there were chief commissioners provinces, and thus it was divided amongst all these people, and then the seat was actually constituted of the Constituent Assembly. Then each province and princely states were to be allotted seats in proportion to their respective population. This is also what we still follow in the Lok Sabha. So this is also here. And then seats allocated to each British province were to be divided among 3 principal communities: Muslim, Sikhs in general, and general in proportion to their population. So the separate electorate thing, that the seats were divided among the 3 principal communities, the Muslims, Sikhs and the general in proportion to the population, is actually not today in our community, in our society, in our country. Then the representatives of each community were to be elected by members of that community. This is called separate electorate, where the member of that community elects the leader for that community, and then that community handles all the affairs of that particular community. So this elected by members of that community by the method of proportional representation by means of single transferable vote. This method is prevalent here, but this concept of separate electorate is not for our country now. Then representatives of princely states were to be nominated by the heads of the princely states. So we have provinces, we have governors provinces, we have chief commissioners provinces, and then we also have the princely states. Thus, it is clear that Constituent Assembly was to be a partly elected and partly nominated body. However, members were to be indirectly elected by the members of the provincial assemblies, who themselves were elected on a limited. See, in the next page we see that this assembly, this Constituent Assembly that we had here, this Constituent Assembly included all important personalities except for Mahatma Gandhi and Jinnah. If you know the answer, comment down why did these two representatives did not attend this Constituent Assembly meet. Now, working of the Constituent Assembly, also I will tell you the answer to this at the end of the video, so stay connected and watch it till the end. Then, the Constituent Assembly held its first meeting on December 9, 1946. So, it was first constituted in November 1946 and then it was in December 1946, it was the first meeting was held, and Muslim League boycotted the meeting, so Jinnah again, and the meeting was thus attended by only 211 members, which it was officially supposed to have 296 members. Then we see that Dr. Satchidanand Sinha, the oldest member, was elected as the temporary president of the assembly following the French practice. So this is important, French practice. In preamble, what did we last study about the Russian practice, the Russian ideology that we've taken, and let's quickly go through that so that we keep revising. See, in preamble we've seen that the ideal of justice in the preamble is taken from Russian Revolution, and the idea of liberty, equality and fraternity was taken from the French Revolution. So this was taken from French Revolution, and then this is again a French practice that we see, that Dr. Satchidanand Sinha, who is the oldest member, and the practice of making the oldest member as the president of the assembly is in French, and thus we've taken it from the France. Then we see that Dr. Rajendra Prasad was elected as the president of the assembly, and H.C. Mukherjee and V.T. Krishnamachari were elected as vice presidents, and thus we can know that assembly had 2 vice presidents. Then objectives resolution, we actually read it in the preamble video from there, that what all points have objectives resolution taken from the preamble. What all points preamble has taken from objectives resolution. See, preamble was inspired by objectives resolution. Preamble was adopted on 1949 and objectives resolution is brought up in December 13, 1946. See, preamble was adopted on 26 November 1949, and then here we see that objectives resolution came up on December 13, 1946. It was moved in this very assembly and it laid down the fundamentals and the philosophy of the constitutional structure. So what does it say? The Constituent Assembly has to be independent, sovereign and republic, and to draw up a future governance of a constitution. Also, wherein that territories that now comprise British India, territories that now form the Indian states and such parts of India as are outside Indian states, as well as other territories as are willing to be constituted, shall be a union of them all. Third was that autonomous units together with residual. Third says the federal nature that we still have. The fourth says that we are democratic, we derive all the rules and laws from the people, and then it shall be guaranteed and secured to all the people of India. What all? Justice, equality and freedom. Justice at the social, economic and political, equality of status of opportunity and before the law, and freedom of thought, expression, belief, faith and worship. Then we also had that there will be safeguards, there will be provisions for minorities, backwards and tribal areas, and we also saw that integrity of the territory of the republic and its sovereign rights on land, sea and air according to justice and the law of civilized nations would be maintained. And this integrity was added by the 42nd Amendment Act in the preamble. And then we see this ancient land attains its rightful and honored place in the world, and it makes its full contribution to the promotion of the world peace and the welfare of mankind. So these were the 8 points of the objectives resolution, and this resolution was adopted on January 22, 1947, which was actually moved on December 13, 1946. So what all points it had? Independent, sovereign, republic. India is a union of all of them. Who wants to be a part? Who all were there? There was British India, there was Indian states, and there was any other parts of India outside India or the states as well as other territories that are willing to be constituted into the independent sovereign India shall be a part of the union of them all. And then we had the federal structure here, then we had the derived from that is the democracy, then we had justice, equality, freedom and integrity. So this is preamble. And then for minorities, backward and tribal area, this we will see that it's in fundamental rights now and it also DPSP now. And then we will see that the resolution was adopted by Assembly on January 22, 1947. Now, then we have changes by the Independence Act. What is this Independence Act? It is, we are doing chapter 2 and it is given in chapter 1 of Indian Polity. That is Indian Independence Act of 1947. On February 20, the British Prime Minister Clement Attlee declared that the British rule in India would end by June 30, 1948, and after which power would be transferred to responsible Indian hands, and all of these features were mentioned, which we will go through when we actually study chapter 1 thoroughly. So what do we actually have to see? That according to the Independence Act that was there, a lot of changes had been made, and all these points are given here. Let's quickly go through them. See, the assembly was made a fully sovereign body, and thus the act empowered the assembly to abrogate or alter any law which was made by the British Parliament in relation to India, which is actually a feature of this Independence Act of 1947 given by Clement Attlee. And then we see the assembly also became a legislative body, and in other words, two separate functions were assigned to the assembly: making of the constitution for free India and enacting of ordinary laws for the country. And assembly became the first parliament of free India, that is, the Constituent Assembly became the first parliament of free India. And when it met as the constituent body, it was chaired by Dr. Rajendra Prasad, who was also what? Who was also the president of the assembly. Also, and when it met as the legislative body, when this very assembly met as the legislative body, G.V. Mavlankar presided, G.V. Mavlankar chaired over it. And then these two functions continued till November 26, 1949, when the task of making the constitution was over. However, Muslim League members withdrew from the Constituent Assembly. Consequently, the total strength of the assembly came down to 299 as against 389, which was originally fixed under the cabinet mission plan. Let's look into the other functions that were performed while the constitution was enacted and the Constituent Assembly met. See, they ratified the India's membership of the Commonwealth in May 1949. So, in 1946, Objectives Resolution came up. In 1947, the Indian Independence Act was there, and then Objectives Resolution was adopted in 1947, and here we have that in India's membership of Commonwealth in May 1949 it was ratified, and then it adopted the national flag on July 22, 1947. So Objectives Resolution January 22, 1947, and in that very year on the month of July dated 22 adopted the national flag and national anthem on January 24, 1950. That is 3 years later on January 24, 1950. And then we also have that it adopted the national song on January 24, 1950. So, national anthem and national song was adopted on the same day. And then it elected Dr. Rajendra Prasad as the first president of India on January 24, 1950. So, we adopted the national flag, we adopted the national song, and we elected our president on the same day. Also, Constituent Assembly had 11 sessions over 2 years, 11 months and 18 days. And thus the total expenditure incurred on making the constitution was rupees 64 lakh. And again on the January 24, 1950, Constituent Assembly held its final session. Alright. After that, we have committees of the Constituent Assembly. There were a lot of committees. Out of these, 8 were major committees and others were minor committees. See, major committees were what? First, we have to have a powers committee. So, power was already vested in Jawaharlal Nehru. We can remember this as he was the Prime Minister and all the powers are vested in the Prime Minister. If he is the Prime Minister, he has to see to the Constitution. So, Union Powers Committee and Union Constitution Committee was both by Jawaharlal Nehru. Then we have Provincial Constitution Committee. See, Union Constitution Committee, as in the union wise, it was so if we see as the state wise, it was Sardar Patel. So, we have to see that both of these personalities handled the constitution together. Drafting committee, we all know Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, so that is out of the question. And then we had advisory committee on fundamental rights, minorities, tribal areas, excluded areas. Sardar Patel was the advisory committee head here, and this committee had the following 5 subcommittees. See, first it is fundamental rights, so fundamental rights. It is then minorities, so minorities. It is tribal, so northeast frontier, tribal areas and partially excluded areas, and then excluded and partially excluded areas other than those in Assam. And we have all the 5 people here: J.B. Kripalani, H.C. Mukherjee, Gopinath Bardoloi and A.V. Thakkar. Who was H.C. Mukherjee? H.C. Mukherjee was also the Vice President of the Assembly along with V.T. Krishnamachari. So, H.C. Mukherjee here is Minority Subcommittee also under Advisory Committee, and Advisory Committee's head was Sardar Patel. These were the 5 committees here, and then we have again Northwest Frontier Tribal Area Subcommittee. Then we have Rules of Procedure Committee, again Dr. Rajendra Prasad, and States Committee Jawaharlal Nehru, and Steering Committee Dr. Rajendra Prasad. So steering committee is what? The committee that actually takes place, that looks into the motion of the work and everything. That was Dr. Rajendra Prasad. Minor committees, these were the major committees, the 8 major committees that we've talked of. Jawaharlal Nehru was major, Sardar Patel was major, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar and Rajendra Prasad. These 4 names were very important in the major committees. And then we have minor committees. Finance, we have credentials, we have house, we have business, we have ad hoc committee, we have committee on functions of the Constituent Assembly, we have on the Supreme Court, we have committee on chief commissioners provinces, we have expert committee on financial provisions, we have linguistic provinces, we have special committee to examine the draft constitution, we have press gallery committee, we also have ad hoc committee on citizenship. So all of these were minor committees, and we have Dr. Rajendra Prasad here, we have Jawaharlal Nehru here, and so we can see that major committees and minor committees weren't differentiated. And then Aladi Krishnaswamy Iyer was there, B. Pattabhi Sitaramayya, and then G.V. Mavlankar. We also saw that G.V. Mavlankar chaired the constituent body when it met as a legislative body. So this is it with the minor committees. And then we also had drafting committee. Drafting committee was set up on August 29, 1947. Objective resolution was adopted on January 22, 1947, and then July 22, 1947, the national flag was adopted, and then the drafting committee was set up on August 29, 1947, and B.R. Ambedkar was the chairman. And then we have other people here who were a part of the drafting committee. T.T. Krishnamachari was not anybody here, but you do not have to confuse them. V.T. Krishnamachari was the vice president, and T.T. Krishnamachari was the member of the drafting committee. And drafter committee, first draft constitution was published on February 1948, and then it was given 8 months to discuss the draft, and they prepared a second draft after all the corrections, which was published on October 1948. So in all, it sat for 141 days. And then we have Dr. B.R. Ambedkar introduced the final draft on November 4, 1948. So it was February 1948, October 1948, and then in November there was the final draft. And then we see that the motion on draft constitution was declared as passed on November 26, 1949. So it was November 4, 1948, and after 1 year and several days, it was November 26, 1949, when the draft constitution was declared as passed. And the constitution as adopted on November 26, 1949 contained a preamble, we've already studied, 395 articles and 8 schedules, and today it is 12 schedules. So see, committee formed 29 August 1947, rough draft Feb 1948, we saw here 8 months to public it was given, and then after 8 months it was October 1948 where it was declared, where it was prepared the second draft, and then it was declared and passed on November 26, 1948, and on November 26, 1949 it was actually declared and passed, and then the constitution was adopted. See, this is a small paragraph for Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. If ever asked about him on the mains question, we can use this as a description. Let's quickly go through it. See, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, the then law minister, he was he piloted the draft constitution in the assembly, and he took a very prominent part in the deliberations of the assembly. He was known for his logical, forceful and persuasive arguments on the floor of the assembly. He is the father of Constitution of India and the chief architect of the Constitution of India and a modern Manu. And in short, he is a law minister, drafted constitution, logical, forceful, persuasive arguments, father of constitution, brilliant writer, constitutional expert, undisputed leader of scheduled caste, and then father of the constitution, and he was also referred to as a modern Manu. Then we have enforcement of the constitutions. The remaining provisions came into force on January 26, 1948, and the date of its commencement celebrated as a Republic Day. And why was January 26 specifically chosen? Because of its historical importance. Why? Because on this day in 1930, like 20 years back, Purna Swaraj Day was celebrated following the resolution of the Lahore session. And the abolition of Privy Council Jurisdiction Act was, however, continued, and this we will see that it was abolished on in the 26th Amendment Act, and this I had yesterday only asked on my Instagram story question. So you can follow me there and keep answering such questions that I keep posting there. Criticism of the Constituent Assembly. See, after the Constituent Assembly was made, there has to be criticism because there can be nothing which has an advantage and has no disadvantages. So let's quickly go through them. See, not a representative body. Why? Because members were not directly elected by the people, they were indirectly elected. They're not a sovereign body. Why? Because it was created by the proposals of the British government and held its session with the permission of the British government. So it cannot be a sovereign body. And then they say that it is time consuming. Why? Because they took unduly long time to make the constitution, and people like Nazaruddin Ahmed called it a drifting committee instead of a drafting committee. And then it was dominated by Congress, because Constituent Assembly was dominated by the Congress party and there were less of other parties, and then the Assembly was the Congress and the Congress was India, was actually remarked by Granville Austin. Then lawyer politician domination. Why? Because all of the people were either lawyers or politicians, and mostly they were dominated by them, and that is why we can see that the bulkiness and the complicated language of the constitution comes from where. And then it was dominated by Hindus as well as Congress, so it was dominated by Hindus, and Lord Viscount Simon called it a body of Hindus. Then we have the small very important facts, that is, elephant was adopted as the symbol of a Constituent Assembly. Sir B.N. Rao, constitutional advisor. H.V.R. Iyengar, secretary to the Constituent Assembly. So president was Dr. Rajendra Prasad. H.C. Mukherjee and V.T. Krishnamachari were the vice presidents to the Constituent Assembly, and secretary was H.V.R. Iyengar. And then we have S.N. Mukherjee, the chief draftsman, and Prem Bihari Narayan Raizada was the calligrapher of the Indian Constitution, and the original constitution was handwritten by him in a flowing italic style. Then original version was beautified and decorated by artists from Shantiniketan, including Nandlal Bose, Bihar Ram Manohar Sinha, and Bihar Ram Manohar Sinha ornamented the original preamble, calligraphed by Prem Bihari Narayan Raizada, and calligraphy of the Hindi version was done by Vasant Krishnan Vaidya and Nandlal Bose. Also, there was one person's name which was already highlighted in the current affairs a few months back. It is who actually designed the national flag. It was Pingelli Venkayam from Andhra Pradesh who designed the national flag, and it was adopted on July 22, 1947. This is it. We have come to an end of this chapter. See, these are all the allocations of seats and the community-wise representation, and you can all go through them if you have interest in knowing about history. But apart from that, it's not that big a use. See, cabinet mission that came in consisted of 3 members, that is Sir Stafford Cripps, who gave up the Cripps proposal, and A.V. Alexander and Lord Pethick Lawrence. And then Government of India Act we'll see in the first chapter, and then we'll see to this. And the members of this subcommittee, which is here, it's given here, so you can go through them, and we have Granville Austin, how from where it's taken. And the question that I was supposed to answer at the end of this video comes here. See, we had a doubt why Mahatma Gandhi and Jinnah did not attend this Constituent Assembly. See, we can see here that Muslim League boycotted the meeting, so insisted on a separate state of Pakistan, which was not heard. So Jinnah is sure to not attend this Constituent Assembly, because he was the leader of all these ideas and the voices that were opined. Jinnah had actually been leading that. And why exception of Mahatma Gandhi? Because see, we see that the Constituent Assembly had ideas of separate electorate that we've talked about here, and the representatives of princely states were different, and then indirect elections. And the separate electorate thing, the Muslim Sikhs in general all differentiated and divided, was not an idea either supported by Mahatma Gandhi, and actually Mahatma Gandhi in person opposed to this idea, and that is why, since his idea was not taken in, his opinion that he had opposed to was dragged into this. That is why Mahatma Gandhi did not accept this invitation and did not be a part of the Constituent Assembly. So this chapter is very easy. It just took us 10 minutes to complete this chapter. We've seen how the demand was actually initiated, and then how the composition was actually given by the Constituent Assembly. We saw how did it work. We saw what was the objectives resolution that was put up. We actually saw what are the changes by the Independence Act that was made. We saw the functions, other functions that were performed at several dates before the Constituent Assembly held its final session. We saw how many committees were there, and that gave us an edge over to know about the working of the Constituent Assembly. And then we can see that here is drafting committee. We can see we saw all of when was the committee drafted, when was the draft prepared, when was the second draft prepared, when was it finally adopted. And then we knew about B.R. Ambedkar, who had been an excellent master over organizing this drafting committee and organizing our constitution and helping in the drafting of the constitution. And then we saw the criticisms of the Constituent Assembly, which is important, and then the important facts that can be there. And thus we came to an end of the making of our constitution. I hope you liked my video. Thank you for watching. Let's quickly meet again and go through our next chapter. This was the revision of the second chapter of Indian Polity, and I'm planning to do it completely and easily and very fast in pinch and see. So we've done second chapter and we have been doing the fourth chapter. So we are done with second chapter and we are done with fourth chapter. We'll quickly see a lot of other chapters and we'll be done with this Laxmikant book very soon. Thank you for watching. Stay in touch. Goodbye.